All right, welcome to the All American Dad Podcast, episode 1. So it begins. I want to welcome my guest, Steve Spain here. We go way back to about 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago,
maybe 2. Yeah,
2?
Randomly at the gym, getting a lift on for the first time, probably in like 10 years.
Oh, it was your first time back?
Well, yeah.
And you're already benching more than me. That's fantastic.
It's different goals, I'm sure, in the gym. But that was bench pressing, at least. I've been doing dumbbells for a while. That was my first time actually doing a bench press in a long time. But with COVID, during the little, our kids were young, so we stopped going to the Y. And now they're a little bit older, we can actually get back to it.
Mine was discovering fishing years ago. That was my activity. That was my lame excuse to not go to the gym anymore.
But that's a good excuse not to go,
it's
though.
Good for the soul, but not so much for the growth of the human body. But anyways.
But we have a ton of mutual friends. It seemed serendipitous that we met the other day.
Clearly.
I mean, your wife I went to school with, I probably met her when I was like 7 or 8 years old. Yep. She was, I think, a grade ahead of me. You used to do drumming for Nimbus 9. I was like a groupie for them, basically. I went to high school with all those guys. And then, between the faith Christian people that, all the, in the church scene and such, I think there's, I don't know how many people we probably know together. But
it'll be fun to, I was just having coffee with Stevie Jenkins, too.
And that's how I came across the studio space. He introduced me to Lori here, and that's so he and I used to work together for a while. Wow. So I actually just bumped into him at the Y last week, and he mentioned that you guys had caught up. So yeah, it's pretty cool how it all worked out.
Amazing. It's a small world, yet seems like someone's orchestrating it.
Yeah, exactly. And I like to say New Hampshire is like a big small town. Like everybody's like somebody's neighbor or uncle or sister or something. It's like 1 degree of separation here.
Sure. Cool. Well, I appreciate you. And it's kind of cool how this works out because we bump into each other, we hit it off. But what we're doing now is literally what I've done multiple times, and it never gets old, is, hey, you want to grab coffee?
Right.
And just talk about life.
Yep.
And that was the premise of wanting to start this podcast, where I wanted to go political, and I'm like, it's kind of a toxic world. I want to put some positivity out there, and I love being a dad. And most dads do. So I figured, let's talk about being dads.
Yep.
And all that goes into it, what leads up to it. And now you're in the thick of it and all that, and just kind of go through it.
Sure.
But that's basically my first question I would ask is, tell me your story. What's it like growing up as a young Steve Spain?
So being a kid, being the son of a dad. Okay. I grew up not too far from here. Grew up in Manchester. Had a great upbringing. Parents married still. I'm the oldest of 3. So I have a brother that's 3.5 years younger. I have a much younger sister who's 14 years younger. So it was kind of, my brother and I kind of had our upbringing. We grew up in Manchester, and then we moved to Goffstown, and my sister was born. And so she kind of had more of like an only child kind of upbringing. When she was born, I was already in 8th grade going into high school. I was really busy with sports and activities, and then I was gone to college. So,
wow.
We definitely have a little differences in our upbringing, I think, with my sister. But no, my parents did, really everything they could. One of the unique ways I grew up in a 2-family house in Manchester with my grandmother above us. So she was kind of the catch-all all the time. If my parents had to go to work or vice versa, she was always there. She brought us to school sometimes, and had a lot of great memories with my grandmother. When I was 2 years old, we used to always, walk in the house. My grandmother's apartment was above ours, and people would just yell hello. So I thought her name was Hello. So I started calling her that, and then I turned that into Hummy. I called her Hummy my entire life, and so she was the only Hummy in the world. And
our landlord, her name was Jessica, and Julie used to call her. She was like 1 or 2 or 3 maybe. Trying to get my dates right. Called her Miss America. Thought her name was.
It's a great
We're
name.
not correcting it. She's Miss America. Always.
I like it. Yeah,
I love those nicknames.
She's not going to get a better name than that, I'm sure. I had a great upbringing. I grew up, right kind of in the middle of Manchester. I'd say the neighborhood probably, it was on the outskirts of, not the center of Manchester. Probably not a neighborhood I'd really want to raise my kids in now. But it was, it used to be, the people owned their houses 30, 40 years. All the yards were really well upkept, and it wasn't tenants. It was all people owned their houses. And, now it's changed into more all tenants living there, and it's brought some different issues. But I had my friends in the city and was exposed to a lot of different things that way. But then I went to the private school in Bedford, so I had a really diverse group of friends. My friends in Manchester, all great guys and have gone down different paths, but none of them finished high school. All of them went to jail. I was around a lot of stuff, but then at Faith Christian, I was around a lot of people that their parents were very protective of them, and in some cases sheltered, but had good influences. So a lot of them were more affluent as well. So I had this kind of melting pot of already like learning to work and talk with a lot of different people and kind of see, the boundaries by which parents parent their kids and such. So I definitely probably grew up a little bit quicker based on some of that. But I kind of learned a lot of what not to do from my friends. Fortunately, it wasn't really me getting in trouble, but I was 1 degree away from it sometimes.
Same, dude. Well, I like to have fun. Ever since I was a kid, I realized if I'm in trouble, it's not fun.
Yep.
No, it's never fun being grounded. So I knew you learn how to like kind of skate around the line.
Yeah, exactly.
But like that reserve, like, well, you got to do what you're, at least in front of people, do what you're supposed to do so that you don't get in trouble and miss out on the fun.
Yeah, exactly. And so you gotta have a good degree of respect and trust with your parents to have that freedom to do the things that you want to do. If you're constantly getting in trouble, you're not going to have a very long rope to go out and do the things you want to do. So I'm now at the point where I'm starting to tell my parents some of the stories of the things I didn't tell them when I was younger.
A brave man.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny going back that way. But no, my father was always very driven. For us, when we were younger, the big message always was like, you need a 4-year degree, you need a bachelor's degree. My father was very driven on that. Felt that was the opportunity to get me a better life, and he worked really hard. Sometimes he worked multiple jobs, and my mom was home with us for a few years, and then she went into doing hair. She kind of worked, not like a crazy full-time schedule, but we never really had babysitters all too much. Either my parents or my grandmother was always with us. We had a lot of attention. They were always very supportive of the sports I was into or activities, and let me pursue those things.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I had, I think, the makings of what gives you a good opportunity to grow into what you want to be. As far as high school and eventually going to college, again, they helped me a bunch through all that. That really set me up to have a great foundation to be where I am now.
What dreams do you have as a kid? What was like your unrealistic, like, did you have any of those, or were you?
Yeah, I don't know. I was probably more realist, I guess. I didn't have, I didn't want to be an astronaut. I didn't want to, start businesses. I wasn't really, I didn't have these big goals, I'd say. I think I just, I had interests, of course, in different things, but I didn't really have this big. I didn't want to be the president or anything like that. So yeah, it's kind of funny. Now that I'm talking to my kids about what they want to do, and they have all these different ideas. But I remember my grandfather joking with me that I was going to be a lawyer because of how much I talked with everybody. There was this. We go to this festival in Maine every year called the Clam Festival in Yarmouth, Maine, and they have this baby race called the Diaper Derby, where literally kids in diapers are racing to this finish line. And the joke with me is I walked along the rope and I talked to all the parents as instead of racing, I was just talking with everybody. So I think there was something there that I knew I would be into, something with working with people in business or whatever it was. So I had some of the foundation there.
That's awesome. And now you said your parents were involved. What were they like?
It's kind of funny. There's the whole nature versus nurture thing.
Yep.
And, I definitely have some of the traits of my parents, but I'm also very different than my parents. My father's worked the same job. He's been at the same company for 40 years.
So he's thinking of sticking with it?
That's how he is. He just, yeah, right. He likes the security. And one thing is, my dad is Steve as well. We're both Steve Spain. We have different middle names, so I'm not a junior. And my wife is actually Kelly, and my mom's Kelly. So we're both Steve and Kelly Spain. So they say that you marry your mother, and I guess I took that too seriously.
Whoops.
Yeah, but they're spelled a little differently for her. But my father very much, I think, values like the security and consistency, and doesn't really like change or disruption. And I've not ever kept a job longer than like a year or two. I'm very entrepreneurial. I hate change. I hate, like, it's prison to me being stuck in one job. I can't stand sitting at a desk doing the same thing over and over again, doing the same job. I've always had like 3 to 7 different things I was doing at once. So I was just very ambitious that way. I was always just taking on more. I like being uncomfortable and kind of stretching myself.
Yep.
My parents, the house they bought in 1999 in Goffstown looks pretty similar to when they've done some changes, but not anything major. They just kind of like things a certain way and such. So yeah, there's definitely some differences there. My mom is, it's kind of funny. You and I were talking a little bit before this, but having kids made me appreciate like how much my mom did.
Man.
I think when I was in high school and college, I saw a lot of what my father did for me, just in terms of like getting me set up for college. And, he was very supportive of all the sports and stuff that I did. But just seeing the way that my mom, like when she took care of my kids, and just like the little art stuff that she did and the way that she kind of tuned into them, I definitely noticed a lot more when you have that awareness once you became a parent. But yeah, no, I think that I never felt unloved or anything like that. They were, there supporting, and, they didn't force me down any path. They let me, I was, again, pretty ambitious in a lot of what I did. So it was more me kind of like updating them of what I was interested in. And they just, it was never a question if I was going to get a ride to practice or anything like that.
Right.
They were fully committed to whatever I needed.
That's awesome. And then that's when we were talking before too. I was like, you said you were wrestling since you were 6. All right. And then one of the questions I asked is some of the difficulties, childhood leading up to adulthood and all that. But you said something that was like, wow, you started a wrestling program at Goffstown High? Like,
yeah.
For lack of better words, like tell me like that.
Yeah. So that was a pretty dynamic point in my life. So I started when I was 6 wrestling. I actually took a break. I broke, I think, my wrist or something when I was 10 or 11. I stopped wrestling at that point and picked up like snowboarding and just, tried some different stuff. Yeah. It was a big move in my life. So I mentioned I have a much younger sister. So we went to private school, and it was just my brother and I. We lived in that 2-family with my grandmother above, but we needed a bigger place when my mom was pregnant with my sister. So the trade-off was, all right, no more private school, but we're going to move out of Manchester. We moved to Goffstown, got a bigger house. But I went from private school, 13 kids, to Goffstown in 8th grade with like 330 kids in my class. 8th grade, there wasn't wrestling yet. I played soccer. That was really big to meet the kids before school. We actually we won the state championship that year, and we were undefeated. And soccer was another sport I played a lot of. So sports was just a natural way for me to meet people. And I think you learn a lot about yourself with sports just out there without talking, of how people compete in their character. So that helped me a bunch. But then all of a sudden, freshman year in high school, now I have the 300 kids I just met. And then I have another 900 kids, sophomore, junior, seniors that I've never met before. Yeah. That same year was the first year Goffstown was going to have a wrestling team. They just timing, the way it worked out, if I was 1 year younger, 1 year older, it wouldn't have worked out this way. But I remember telling my dad I was interested in wrestling again. And, he was, kind of like, okay, that's cool. I mean, it's not a very glorious sport, wrestling. Pretty much most all of it's grueling until you get your hand raised. It's a lot of work, a lot of effort.
Well, in wrestling, you use muscles you didn't know you even had.
Yes.
I was a Taekwondo guy, and I remember we did some ground fighting, And within about 30 seconds, I couldn't breathe. I'm like, what is this sensation of not, being fully exhausted? I'm like, really? It's a whole other world when you dip into that ground fighting, wrestling, any of that.
It's exhausting.
So,
the opportunity came up, and I remember we did this demo in front of the entire school of wrestling. We unrolled a mat in front of the entire school at like this assembly, and me and this other guy on our team did like this bunch of big moves. And from that point on, most people in the school knew me as like the wrestling kid, and especially the older guys. And I ended up becoming captain of the team my freshman year. And so I was captain all 4 years, and it was just a real dynamic, going from 14, to now leading the 18-year-old seniors. And, you had to grow up quickly, and I was very cognizant of how I conducted myself in the hallways, in the classroom. You're leading these people. I was trying to earn respect for myself and the team in the school, and I was trying to earn respect for the team out in the state of this new program, Goffstown Wrestling. We wanted to be something that was respected out there, and so I put in a lot of effort to do that, and it caused me to make a lot of different decisions and form habits that I still think about and use today. It was a really unique opportunity in my life.
How did that not go to your head? It's just you flip the roles. You take a young James of 14, 15 years old. The level of insecurity I had. Okay, now I'm the captain of the wrestling team that, like the key piece, first year and, making headway. I mean, they go to your head a little bit.
I don't know if
doesn't sound like it did.
I don't know if it went to my head. I definitely had a competitiveness to me to a degree, and something with wrestling. It was new in the school. We were kind of like the stepchild in the school, like to get gym space, and it's it was new. It's kind of weird to people in the school, and I definitely got challenged a lot. Kids that weren't really into wrestling, like there was guys that weren't really into sports, and they would challenge me kind of to fights a little bit, like kind of scrap. And I literally would like 3 or 4 of them at once, and I would just stack them all up on top of each other at like lunchtime and stuff. And it was, it wasn't mean. It was, it was it was fun to me. And, it was just, so there was that stuff, but, just as much as, I was, competitive and, really driven with the sports, like, I always wanted to be down to earth and approachable with people. I wasn't, I was never a jerk to anybody. And I just wanted to, again, I was trying to represent something bigger than myself. So I wasn't.
So in taking that approach, you literally lift people up.
Yeah.
As opposed to pushing them down to lift yourself up.
Yep.
But at the same time, it lifts everyone up at the same time because you build a reputation of a, first year of wrestling program and success, right?
Yeah. There was I had the license plate wrestler. It was on my license plate, and there was this newspaper article written once, and the guy mentioned how like I was giving everyone rides home after practice, and like I was trying to build the program. And wrestling is a really unique sport in that similar, since you have this Taekwondo background, it's just you out there. Right.
Yep.
And it's like you have the team, you have your coaches that support you, but eventually it's just you that steps out on that mat, and you can only blame yourself, but you're responsible for how you perform out there as well.
And you carry your school's name on your back.
Yeah, exactly. So you're representing something bigger than yourself. So it became, I wasn't just Steve Spain, I was Steve Spain, the Goffstown wrestler. And that's how I talked about it to people. And, being a leader, some are more vocal than others, whether it's a boss, the leader of a company or a sport. But I really believe in action, being there first, being there last, being the fastest, tuning in with the coach the most, listening to your teammates, helping your teammates. Like that was what I was all about.
That is the exact picture perfect. If I describe a leader, it's someone that can do everything that they're asking of you 5 times better, and will do it. First in, last out.
Yep.
Goes the extra mile. Takes a back seat to help others.
Yep.
It's just I can get behind that kind of leader all day, every day.
It was, and it's just like starting a business or anything. You're jumping in and you're kind of learning on the job and such. But it was sometimes you have to put yourself in the situation and trust yourself in it too. Whether you're a believer in God or not, I always like the phrase meet. I don't know if I've heard it or I just invented it in my head, but I would say to myself, meet God halfway. Like sometimes you have to take the risk and just like jump in and put yourself in the situation and take that action. Yep. And, sometimes it's an act of faith and you don't really know what you're getting into. Like another phrase, commit, you'll figure it out. It's just like get yourself in there, trust yourself. Like you don't know, like us doing this podcast right now, right? Like we literally just said, like we didn't have a big plan or anything, but sometimes you have to start, get yourself in there and see what happens.
So I'm a believer in God, Jesus, Christian, whatever label you want. But when I say God talks to me, I get this thought in my head that's way smarter than me, way more profound than me. I'm like, God's talking to me. And there's a dealership I work at, because I work at a lot of dealerships. I refinish rims. It's a fun job. It's great. But the sliding door is pretty slow. And I had my earbuds in, listening to something, and I'm like, if I walked a little faster, I would have slammed into that door. It just kind of caught me off guard, the sliding door. But then I just had this thought, and I knew it was the Lord. He goes, some doors only open with forward motion. It's like, sometimes you can meet them halfway.
Yep.
You got to put forward motion in.
Yep.
That door will swing wide open.
Right.
So that just reminded me of that. I'm like,
there's a lot of different, it evokes a lot of different things. There's this idea for how fighter jet pilots are trained, where they're trained just to act, whether they know it's the right decision or not, because it gets you out of an inertia and gets you like in momentum and motion. And when you're in motion, you'll continue. So they're literally trained, like even if they don't know which way to go, just to move. And that gets you in action. It also reminds me of, I think it's an Amish saying, like just start and you're 50% done.
Wow.
Like little things like that, just getting in motion is just so powerful.
See, I get on tangents and I like deep dive, and fighter pilots is one of them. That's funny you bring that up, because the other thing too is like, starting the podcast and like, I want to be Joe Rogan. Well, I just kind of felt this nudge to study fighter pilots, and one of the main things that jumped out at me is, you see them in the centrifuge where they're spinning at up to 9 Gs, and all of them say it's torturous hell. They hate it. It's awful. Just to get their body acclimated to intense G-forces and to practice the technique so they don't black out in a $20 billion jet. And then, like if you're like talking about Blue Angels, I remember watching them, and they'll just sit all in a row, eyes closed, with a pen for their little joystick, and like they're doing the little hand motions, and they're talking through everything they're about to do. And to me, I'm like, can I just get up in the plane and fly the thing? Like, yep. No, because they're going to fly inch to inch the wing. They're just going to close these gaps, and they're so they go through all of this. Then they finally do their, all those hours for the 45 minutes in the plane. Then they come down for their 2-hour debrief, and they go through all the mistakes they made and all this. So all that to say is we get to see them flipping. I'm like, oh, that's great. Who wants to go through the centrifuge? Who wants to go through like the meticulous mathematics and all the just learning all the stuff and everything you have to go through to get to being in the plane? I'm like, Are we willing to go through the stuff and to appreciate it too?
We live in an instant gratification society, right? It's like a lottery ticket society. If I just have this one idea, if I just do this one thing, my life's going to change. I'll have enough money. I'll have my happiness. But in reality, it's like it's a sculpture, that you're chipping away at for years, right?
Wow.
Right?
That's so good.
That's, it takes time. It's not glorious. It's delayed gratification, but it's like believing in what you're doing and like keeping that discipline and habits. And it's not all glorious. You're going to have a lot of contrast of what you don't like, but a lot of that, the setbacks and the hardships and such, like that's what teaches you, right? And it's like sometimes you have that perspective, like I'm glad I went through some of that stuff. Maybe it's an injury or it's you get laid off from a job or a business fails, but like how much do you learn from all that?
Well, literally there's not a muscle in the body that doesn't grow without being going through it.
Right.
And I'm realizing that's just a life principle. We don't grow in any stretch of the imagination until you're pressed, until you're forced to, until, That's awesome. So, know a little more about you. You're married, right?
Married, yeah. We just had our 10-year anniversary this
Nice.
past September. September of 2014.
Where'd you guys meet?
We met working at Southern New Hampshire University.
Cool.
So I think that was probably a God thing as well. I was working for myself before that job. I got the taste of being, my own company and such, but there's no benefits when you're working for yourself.
Right.
It can be tough, and it just felt like it was a time to start. My wife kind of had similar feelings before she took that job as well. She started a month after I did. I basically, maybe like a few months into that job, didn't really want to work there anymore, but I met her, so that was the intention. I think of that. So I worked
mission
there.
Accomplished.
Yeah.
Now you can move on to the next.
Exactly. So I think I worked there like 1 year exactly. I think I gave my notice like a year from the day I started. But no, it was a great. I mean, it was a great environment. I'm just not a good employee. It's hard for me to do the same thing all day. But a lot of people I started with still work there. They did a great job. My wife ended up working there 5 years. But so we met there. I met her would have been March of 2013, and everything happened pretty quick. It's kind of like you kind of we started dating April of 2013. I proposed to her March of 24, and we were married September of 24. So we got engaged and married in 6 months. So it was pretty quick, and most of that, it wasn't like typical wedding prep. We got married. Her parents have a 60-acre farm in Henniker. It had a vineyard and barn building. So we spent the entire summer like working on the barn. I almost killed myself several times. The joke is like, why is Steve using power tools? Like he shouldn't be doing that. We were like removing floors from the barn. Exactly. So it was a lot of work, to work, and it's, we had to coordinate our own, I used Joey Bolduck as our DJ.
Oh, wow. Yep.
I tried getting Nimbus, but the timing didn't work out to play. That would have been a dream for me. But
I had Kevin Darcy as our DJs.
Oh, that's cool. But yeah, with that said, it all happened really quickly. But it's kind of like right place, right time, right season in your life. You kind of know. My wife is unlike anyone else. She is, we were kind of talking about this before too. She homeschooled all the way through until college. She was very uniquely herself and, unscathed by society, wasn't influenced by all the socialization that people kind of go through sometimes. She very uniquely, asked questions that are unique to her and just authentically her. And her father kind of compares her to, in The Grinch where they say his heart was 2 sizes too small. He says that her heart is 2 sizes too big, where she just family and, God and, family values and children are it for her. Everything's built around that. So she really brought.
She must be really depressed then. Must have no life. It just must be the worst. Life's built all around family. Man, I feel.
Yeah.
We'll say a little prayer for her.
and that's how we've built our life, though. I mean, I never would have thought sitting here today that I would be homeschooling our kids, but basically, so we have 3 kids. They're 4, 6, and 8, soon to be 5, 7, and 9, and with our first child, we both were working, and then I was actually laid off from my job in 2016, right about when Kelly was about to give her notice to go home first, full. So glad it kind of worked out that way. That company was a great company to work for, and they gave me the best gift they could have given me. They paid me for 3 months, and I didn't have to work. They gave me a 3-month severance, still paid my insurance. So I literally went to the library every day, and I read about 30 books. I went there like a job, punched in, read every book I was looking to read. I took notes as I was reading them. I then took I did that for the first month. The second month, I just started studying different business models and different things I was interested in. And I ended up deciding I wasn't going to go back to work for a company again. And I was just going to do my own thing again. So I reconnected with the company that I had started years earlier and went down that path. But with that said, that all kind of tied into, how we've kind of taken this different path of, I didn't want to be an employee. I wanted to run and start my own businesses, my own investments. Kelly always had a dream of being a stay-at-home mother and homeschooling the kids. And so it took a lot of work to get to that,
Sure.
a lot of decisions. And when we had our second child, that was April of 2018, we decided she wasn't going to go home. She was going to, not go back to work after that.
Yeah.
So that was, a pretty big jump for us, leaving, at Southern New Hampshire University, they have really good benefits. My wife has type 1 diabetes. Having diabetic supplies are expensive, and, the risk of insurance and such, there was a lot of fear there of like, how are we going to do all this? Am I going to earn enough? How my business is going to do? How are we going to provide for the kids? All that stuff, right? But meet God halfway, right? You just kept kind of pushing, and I kept kind of betting on myself, and here we are.
So what was that day like? First time hearing you're going to be a dad? What was that like?
Oh man, you're nervous, you're excited. It's crazy. You start thinking about things differently. You start thinking about like self-preservation as well. Like your job is to stay alive. To provide for your kids, right? So you start thinking about your health a little differently. You start thinking about longevity a little differently. You start thinking about risk, am I driving a lot? Am I going to be more subjective to, stuff like that? You start thinking about things a little differently. The day my daughter was born, our oldest, her name's Edie. She's named after my wife's grandmother, Edith. And, I wish I'd met her earlier. I felt bad that I didn't meet her earlier, is how I felt. It's like your heart stretches another level. You start kind of, it also feels like you're a part of like this like new like fraternity or group, like you're now a part of the club. When I just felt like when I talk to other parents now, I could just relate to them.
You just know
so much differently, right? And at the time, for years I had, so after my wrestling years, I've coached for a long time.
Oh, nice.
So you're working with other people's kids, and I just also understood that perspective differently now too. It's again with wrestling, and I'm sure with Taekwondo, like as a parent, it's probably one of the hardest roles is putting your kid out there who's basically getting in a fight and you can't protect them, as a parent. And so I could relate to that. And now I'm dealing with that with my kids a little bit now as they're starting to get into wrestling, different sports. And with that said, really profound dynamic shift in my life. It's not all glorious. It's definitely, there's the saying, long days, short years. That's kind of how it is, right?
Sums it up.
Yeah. It was, and basically, I'd say that, there's, as far as like just struggles and such as a parent, it isn't all glorious. I mean, I experienced, they call it paternal postpartum, kind of depression, where like you're just kind of stuck in this like cycle of, the baby's always crying up at night, you're always feeding them and such, you're not really pursuing really any of the things that you typically would do to make yourself, exercise and health and such. And when we had our third child, Harry, so the pandemic was declared March 11th and he was born March 12th. So we were sitting in the hospital Lord. As that was being declared, and there was no directive at that point. So like families reaching out and asking if they should come to the hospital, and I'm like, I don't know if you should. Both for I don't know if there's anything in this hospital, and I don't know if you're going to bring something, and we have this newborn coming. So there was a lot of just social like awkwardness there a little bit, and I'm also like reading about like. There's no toilet paper. Like there's no, all the shelves are in, right? Like
I contributed to that. I only got my one box, but I'm just like, it's good to have some of this. And sure enough, I was correct. Like it completely, we lasted the whole shortage.
Wow.
Because I got that. Stacy was a little upset. Like, really? I'm like, it worked out.
Right, but
I got lucky. I wasn't that.
It was crazy then, though, right? It was a crazy time, and at the time, I was So I had gone back to work for the company is called Cooptopia. We did promotions for locally owned businesses all in the area. And I had started the shift in 2019 to doing more real estate work. I was always really interested in real estate. We owned a 3-family in Manchester at that time that I was renting out. But I had come across this this kind of opportunity I'd never really heard of before. So all through college in those years, I had done a lot of contractor work. I would ref wrestling meets and coach. And I always liked reffing because I would just show up, I'd ref the meet, and I was gone. And you're just paid a fee for that meet. You know, it was kind of nice. You could just fit it in with your schedule. But it was only for wrestling season. It wasn't year round. So I came across this this opportunity that was called, it was like a closing agent, a contract closing agent. And basically, when you buy a house, you sit down with someone, you do all the paperwork to buy the house or do you refinance. You basically, I came across a course where you get certified to learn all that paperwork, and then you become a notary to facilitate it. And I literally, paid whatever that costs. And then I was on the road, basically out. I would get all these jobs, and I would just start doing. And I was just getting paid one closing at a time. And I ended up really just supporting our family doing that. Wow. And the timing of it was really good because right before COVID and through COVID until the end of like 21, interest rates were super low. So everyone was refinancing, and there was a ton of people coming into New Hampshire buying houses. So I was doing like sometimes 8 of these a day. And I was all over the place. The attorney, I ended up working with one law office where he was so busy he couldn't do them. So it was like perfect timing where I basically ended up doing a lot of the closings for him. And I wasn't, it was busy enough, but it wasn't 40 hours a week. It probably ended up being like 20 to 30 hours maybe. So I was able to have some of that life balance I wanted with the family, and I was getting a ton of real estate experience. But that was a big, getting myself financially stable that way. We're working like one closing at a time. It wasn't a salary. It wasn't a big thing. It wasn't recurring. I was literally on call like a doctor, like every day, like, hey, Steve, can you be in Milford at 12? Can you be in Portsmouth at 3? Can you be, and that was my life for several years, was just driving around with the paperwork, meeting with people, doing these closings, it was kind of cool. And I ended up getting my real estate license and, just kind of kept going from there. But it was just keep on trying new things. And it's only continued to grow for us in terms of our business and my investments and such. But it was putting yourself in the situation, trying something new, and that same kind of mentality with like sports and wrestling of just like working hard, showing up every day and believing in yourself. And that's allowed, Kelly to live her dream. She's able to be home with the kids full time. Most days we have all 3 meals together. The kids are in the house. I'm now mostly working at the house now. I do different work now. I'm not on the road as much, but it's taken a lot of decisions. But the mentality is I can always go chase other work or business, but you don't get time back when your kids are young.
Right.
You get one childhood with them. And so we're very cognizant. We've made a lot of decisions around that of we want to be in their life as much as possible. I think there's a lot of great teachers. I had a lot of great teachers, and, I think that they've done a really good job, but I do believe that no one's going to invest as much in your children as the parents should, right? Like, so that was a lot of our thought process going into it.
That was one of the blessings with 2020 for me was I had no idea how stretched I was between work. I was doing gigs. I wasn't just in Nimbus. I was in a couple of cover bands.
Oh, wow.
And playing worship almost every Sunday.
Wow.
So you see it stretched a little thin. Well, 2020 kind of like put the kibosh on everything because we couldn't go anywhere. And I was like, oh, this is a perfect time to like kind of reset and like reset the boundaries of like, because I just not cognizant of time, but like realizing how much time went by. I'm like, I'm not getting this back. Yeah. And I will regret it if I take it for granted.
Sure.
So since then, been way more cognizant about like, okay, have I been home? Like, and it sounds like I enjoy my family. I can just get very like tunnel vision on certain things and not realize that I'm like, oh wait, don't want to neglect them. You know, it's been like night and day since then. It's been awesome. It's been rewarding because again, I'm like, I have almost have two teenagers now. I was like, how did that happen? I was a teenager, so it's like, that's like the hugest, just, you said the long days, short years, emphasis on the short years. Because it's like, I was told don't blink.
Right.
And I listened and I believed them, but still, like, you blink every now and then, you're like, oh man, my daughter's going to be driving soon.
Wow.
So it's like, absorb every minute.
Yeah.
You're going to get, when they're off living their lives, you get plenty of time. You're not getting this time back. So I just emphasize that to anyone listening, like, just absorb and enjoy every last ounce you can.
Absolutely. But there's also, I think on the other side, I think just some of the other things that I've sought to balance, because I think that being, there's no such thing as like moderation. It seems like sometimes it's extremes one way or the other. And it's, I was talking with someone the other day and he's like, you guys are, it's like you're living in a minivan, your entire house. Like, you're working there, your mom, mom's homeschooling the kids. You're all in the house together all the time. I do think as fathers, sometimes, like, I have a hard time with like domestic life, sometimes like the constant, cleaning the dishes, cleaning the house, doing all that. Like, I feel like I need to get out of the house and be like working on something, like to like balance myself out to be a good husband and good father. If I'm around them too much, like, I don't think I'm the best version of myself. So it's like seeing you at the gym the other day, that's what I was doing. I was getting back out and rebalancing, right? And like letting some of that out, on the weights instead of, being edgy around the house or something, I think is really important.
Yeah, no, I have like, there's a guy I listen to, he's a good friend. His name's Josephus. He runs a church down in Springfield, Mass. But he spoke at the camp meeting I go to every August. And one thing, I was like, it was a super aha. He goes, that little boy inside, that dreamer, he never goes away. He's always there. And that helped me realize, like, oh, okay, I'm not being unreal. It's just a natural part of manhood to want to go accomplish something and conquer something. You know? There's always going to be that next goal, that next mountain you want to go after too. Right. So that's balancing those two. And
there's never a point where you made it. Right. Like, there's always another mountain. And it's, I think that's another thing in like our society. Like, if I just have this one thing, I'll be happy. Right. So what I do for work now, I manage a real estate portfolio and I direct a foundation where we teach personal finance. And both of these organizations are started by this man, Peter Morgan. He's in his early 80s now, and he's still incredibly sharp. He works with us. He's in the meetings, and he's seen all his peers when they go to retire, they start having mental and health issues. And so I think the trick is finding something that you like to do, having the right kind of struggle and strain in your life, whether it's in the gym or a sport you like or a job you like. And like, if you can figure that out, like, you're going to have a good life. It's working a job that you don't like and cause all the stress, or, some people, I can't run on a treadmill for an hour like that. But if I'm playing a sport, if it's ultimate frisbee or something, like, I'll run a lot more. It'll be a lot more fun. You got to find something that you like to do that has that strain. But yeah, it's, if you stop doing that stuff too early, or you think that it's just one thing, it's just going to be a long life. You just accept, like, there's always going to be a new mountain to climb. Yeah, but that keeps you sharp, keeps you into it. So what was year one like? Year one, now you have a baby. Congratulations. Oh man, what's that first year like? One question I also was wondering is, like, you found out you're a dad. Did you feel ready? It's a simple. I definitely have self-confidence in myself. Yeah. My wife, she had an emergency C-section, our first child. The baby came 2.5 weeks early. So those first few days I was doing a lot. And I read that book, The 5 S's, The Happiest Baby in the Block or something. It was like the swaddle, shush, on their side, sway, or something. And I had that down. The nurses were actually pretty impressed. She was the only one that did it. The 2 boys did not go along with that as well, only the girl. But so, yeah, I mean, I had some confidence in that. And it's, before she was born, I was like trying to sleep deprive myself. I was like trying to get up at like 3 or 4 in the morning and like get used to like this is what life's going to be like, and try to do a simulation. No simulation worked, by the way. Nothing's like it. But no, I mean, it was a big adjustment. We were living in our 3 family, so we lived on the 3rd floor of an apartment in Manchester, going up and down those flights with a baby and all this stuff. I mean, the baby shower, bringing all that stuff up and down was a lot. But I was laid off 6 months after my daughter was born. She was born May 28th. I was laid 5 months. I was laid off October 28th, right as my wife was getting ready to potentially give notice at her job, and I was going to be the primary income provider. So that was not in the plan.
Sure.
So all of a sudden, now my wife's working. I'm on the severance pay, and figuring out what I want to do. And it was at a point like, the safest thing probably would have been go find another job, get some good benefits, and then Kelly could give her notice, and we could do the plan. But we wouldn't be where we're at right now, and I'd be working some job I was miserable at. So we took a harder path, and it was hard. Like there were some months like I was not earning anything, and I was just like plugging away and just trying to will it into existence, and it was tough. But that first year, it was some tougher conversations and an effort and such. But my wife, when we talk through this and when she's asked about it, have I always provided? And I have, and that gives her. My wife was very much kind of like as I described my father. Like she valued security and certainty, and making sure things were good. And here I am as this entrepreneur that I couldn't provide that at first. I couldn't have this. I just mentally, it was too much on me to work, be in a regular job every day. I had to be doing different things. And that first year was some of those battles there. But then we started to, I ended up being in a pretty good situation as we, made progress with it. And then, we ended up having a second and third kid. They reached 23 months apart. So they're all pretty close together. So, but that first year, it was definitely that side. And I think that's common. You're a young parent, you're figuring stuff out in your career, and, some people are working multiple jobs and they don't get to spend much time with our kids. And, I didn't ever get that impression. But it's, it certainly wouldn't be something that I would want to go back to right now.
You passed.
Yeah. Yeah.
You did that part.
Yeah, but
year one.
Yeah, but no, I definitely, I love looking back at the photos and videos of those days and stuff. And now she's 8 years old, and she basically already knows more about where things are in the house than I do, and she's holding me to rules that my wife is. So I'll be all set for having a woman in my life to make sure I'm doing the right thing and listening to the rules and such. So no, it's been good.
It's wonderful. I remember I was telling you earlier, my daughter's born. My first response to my mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea.
Yeah, right.
Just within the first 15 minutes of being a father, I'm like, my mom's amazing.
Yes.
Seeing what Stacy went through, for 9 months, and then like the whole culmination with Julie coming out. But since then, for me, it's been a series of aha moments of like, that's why that set my dad off.
right.
Like it makes sense.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Wow. How many, what are some aha moments you had since being a father where you're like, that's what, they handled that even better than I would have.
Yeah, right. I think there's a Mark Twain quote. I think it's Mark Twain. The older you get, the smarter your dad is. And you can say it for either both parents.
Good.
The older you get, the smarter your parents are,
good.
right?
Yeah.
So I think it was some of that. I think just little things like really appreciating my upbringing with having my grandmother there too. That was really great. Like, how awesome would it be to have like someone that could just catch all, babysit if like the work situation to work out for you and your spouse. So I thought that was really pretty amazing. My parents basically, I don't think my grandmother charged them to rent there. So we basically had, they made a lot of decisions to set us up. So the biggest thing, especially now, everything's so expensive now, right? Housing, rent, mortgages, right? So having that situation allowed for my parents to pay for us to go to private school. They allowed us, to do some of those things. We were always going on different trips and, not big things. We did a few bigger trips, but like, we were always going to the beach or Boston or Canby Lake Park or, just my father liked taking us and doing things. Like he liked being on the road. He was a truck driver when I was younger, so he just liked driving. So we were always just out doing things. And, I think just that decision of my being in that house, enabled a lot of that life, when we were younger. So I was always very cognizant of that. I didn't buy, so I'm a real estate guy. I've done several investments, but I bought 3 investment properties before I bought my first single family house, because I was very much in tune with the fact that a single family house is just pure cost. It doesn't, it takes your entire paycheck. You're paying that each month. The rental, with a multifamily, you can use the rental income to pay the mortgage for yourself, and you can live there, at a lesser cost or for free. And I think a lot of that upbringing I had influenced that, where I didn't want to be gone all the time because I was having to pay these bills for these debts I took on and not be present for my family. So I ended up, we bought our first house together 2 years ago. It was July of 22 now, so going on 3 this year. So I think some of those decisions, from a financial standpoint, were influenced there. And just, I think, looking back, like they were really present. My father, the way that they did it is my mom, she was a hairdresser for most of my childhood, and my father worked second shift. So he went in at 4 p.m. and worked till like 12 or 1 in the morning. So there was always someone home there. But like when I had to get up early to go to sports, whatever, like my dad was there, even though like he slept like 3 or 4 hours. Wow. Like it didn't matter. Like he just, they were always just trying to, if they could be at a practice or a game, they could be. And, so a lot of those choices definitely, I think influence how I wanted to be for my kids, I know the question is, being a parent, but I, especially with what I do for work right now, I'm very cognizant of, a lot of our financial life decisions we make create or take away opportunities for what we can do as a parent. If you take on a bunch of debt and you have a $700 a month car payment or all that stuff, well, if you don't have investment money or something paying for that, it's you working, and that's your life. You got to go make that money to pay for those things, and that takes away time for your family.
For sure.
So yeah, that was a big thing for me, from my parents.
I just got one more question.
Okay.
This is a fun one. I'm going to try to ask this every time. It's just to see what kind of answers I get. But you get to go back in time. Mm-hmm. Go back to the day your first kid's going to be born. And you get to give yourself advice. It's a solid piece of advice. What do you tell yourself?
Oh, man.
It can be 2 things. I'll be...
Yeah.
No, but what's something that you're just like... Yeah.
I probably tell myself this still every day. And I think it's nothing groundbreaking, but just trying to slow down and appreciate the situation. I think particularly now with like getting 3 kids to bed each night and just the...
You's outnumbered.
Yeah, the madness that involves.
Just imagine.
But, I'll say this, and it's kind of... it's a Stoic philosophy, like you're going to die one day.
Yeah. And,
I had one of my childhood best friends. He died a couple years ago. I just spent time with his family. We all get together on the day that he died and on his birthday, and he's got 2 young kids. They're 7 and 5 now. And I see them on, his birthday and on that, and I sit there and think to myself, like, hey, like sometimes I know it's all stressful and like you're trying to get them to bed, you're trying to get there by a certain bedtime, you're trying to, all these expectations you put in your mind, right? Of all these things that you're after, but like what if I wasn't there, or what if like I couldn't have this moment or this opportunity? And like I think having that perspective helps me slow down a little bit and just think like all these like weight and expectation we put on ourselves to like get certain things done by a certain time, like just slowing down and just like, you know, little thing. We took our kids snowshoeing yesterday, and my little guy, you know, he's 4. He just kept flopping over on his, you know, he kept tripping over the snowshoes. And, you know, one part of you wants them to like develop and get stronger and doing on their own, but he kept asking me to help him up. And just slowing down and just thinking, when else in my life is he going to be asking me to help him up?
Right.
You know, and just like, there's all these little things, like they're trying to go to, you know, you're trying to get them to bed, but they want you to read them one more story. Well, when else are you going to be able to read them one more story? You know, it's like there's these little moments where they're not going to, this might be the last time they ask for that.
Yeah.
That you just try to like soak those in a little bit. And this is stuff I have to self-talk with myself, because I'm, you know, very like, I want to get things done by a certain time. And sometimes like, you know, it's, parenting is like the most inefficient thing ever. You know, like, you know, just like, I don't know how many times like I go crazy trying to get them all out the door to like get to whatever event on time. And, you know, one kid has to go to the bathroom, the other kid needs his shoes on, the other forgot this, that, you know, and it's like, it can be maddening, but like, that is the stuff that you're going to miss one day, you know, is all those little things. And, so that has, the patience and the appreciation of just like the everyday moments is what I think I would tell myself that first, you know, like, hey, look, it's going to be messy. It's going to be inefficient. It's not going to go to plan. You're going to have all these different side paths you're going to go down, but like, that is what you're going to really appreciate when you look back on your life. Like when you're, you know, when you're dying one day, right? These are the days you're going to miss, is when your kids were young. So I think that's what I'd probably tell myself.
All right. Bonus question. So we see fatherhood portrayed in the entertainment industry, different TV shows growing up, from Tool Time to Modern Family, all of that. With whatever you've watched, how do they get it right? How do they get it wrong? It's a bonus question.
Yeah, it's a good bonus question.
I didn't prep you on this one.
No, it's all right. No, I like it. It's kind of funny. I was just, Kelly hasn't really watched Home Improvement much, so I showed her the pilot episode of that the other day.
So good.
You know, there's a lot of portrayal of like the overweight, like aloof kind of dad, like not really, you know, just always doing goofy things and such. And I think they get some of right of like the you know, the work that dads put in and such to provide for the family. But yeah, there's definitely some misconception there, I'd say, between, you know, I guess it's different if you're looking at TV shows maybe versus movies.
Sure. But either or, I mean, entertainment industry with their portrayal of it.
Yeah.
You know,
and
that was my sarcastic joke earlier. Oh, her life's over. It's all about family. Like,
right. Oh, that's the thing too. It's like,
the misconception that.
Yeah, there's a misconception also that like almost like life's over. In some way for our dad. Like I've seen sometimes like they like, you know, now like you're sucked into this kind of life and you're not able to like go pursue your own individual interests and such. You see sometimes. And I was thinking the other day, like, you know, I'm 38 years old right now. You know, I got a young family, and, you know, we're like, is this not like what we're designed to do? Like, are we not in like the peak part of like, you know, we're as young as we're ever going to be, and we're as old as we've ever been, right? In every moment, but like providing for your kids, like running a house, being a dad, being a husband, working, like it's about as busy as we'd probably ever be, but like this is what we're meant to do, you know? And that's, I think that is probably a little off, you know, because it's not necessarily entertaining. You know, when you're trying to have an entertaining TV show, you got to make, you know, satire out of it and such. But as far as like having meaning and purpose and having the ability to like meet the need, like it's a pretty cool situation to be in, like that you can do it. And, you know, you got to find the times to recharge yourself, and, you know, because it's very draining sometimes. So you gotta, you know, whether you're an early person before the kids get up, or you find that time after they go to bed, just to, you know, spend time with your wife, making time. We had our 10-year anniversary. We went away to Florida for a few days. That was almost 6 months ago, and we haven't gone on a date since. So like making time for date nights and such.
Yeah.
It's hard to do. It's hard to fit it in unless you have like a family member or you have a good babysitter that you trust and such. So I think some of those details do really make you a better father and husband, but you got to make the time for it, because if you don't, like, life's just going to keep happening, and you'll all of a sudden another 6 months go by again. Those long days, short years again. It just the train just keeps on moving. So yeah, I'd say that's I don't know if
fulfillment, the purpose there. Like, I mean, even just with tying to the married life too. I just I think of who'd I'd been if I just stayed single my whole life. I'm like, no, my wife pushes me to be like the best version of myself and then beyond. And like, not pushes, she inspires me. Like, she draws it out of me. Like, like no one else has.
Yep.
And then same thing with the kids. And it's like, well, there's a reason for it. Like, they're worth it to me. Like,
right.
But they give me that inspiration to not, I would have just coasted, gone with the flow. And it's like, but no, I'm experiencing things that I would not have.
Marriage is so we did premarital counseling, and I remember there was a pastor that married us, and she said something along the lines of like, marriage doesn't always make you happy, but it makes you holy.
Wow.
And like, you're with this person all the time, and they're gonna call you out on some of your stuff, right? And they should. Yep. And it's ideally you have a partner that does hold you to be the highest version of yourself. And is it fun? No, not all the time. It's not fun being called out on your stuff. And my wife's very good at really working with the kids on like their emotional intelligence and like saying sorry to each other and like making repair with each other. But who child number one is that she's doing that with is me. She's holding me to go repair with one of our kids because, the way I reacted. And, is that comfortable? Not really, but, it's you're setting the example for your kids. And I mean, especially for some people, like, maybe you don't have this long established marriage yet. And all of a sudden now you're kind of going to battle, so to speak, with raising kids. And like, you have to work as a team together. It's, you have to be two horses in line, and it brings up a whole bunch of other stuff. How are you going to discipline? How are you going to teach? How do you do your finances? Do you believe in God? Are you going to go to church? All those things, like, and eventually, if you don't talk about it, it does come out at one point.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Best to hit it on the, just come out with it, and discuss.
You got to talk about those things. My younger sister, she's engaged right now. So she's asked me to facilitate the wedding, to marry her and her fiance. And, I had to talk with her about the stuff that we went through with our premarital counseling. And I said, well, hey, look, I mean, I've never done that, but if you want me to do that, we're going to have some uncomfortable conversations. I think you need to have an understanding of how you're going to do your finances. And, do you want to be talking to your older brother about sex? There's expectations about sex life and marriage and such that you got to talk about, and, how you're going to raise the kids. And are you guys both, do you believe in the same religion? Are you guys going to go to church? What are you going to, all that stuff. Because if you don't talk about it, like, that, these are all reasons a marriage can go south, and it can make parenting very tough once you have kids as well. So we're still talking on that. It's not necessarily something that I think I would want to, there would be a lot of uncomfortable conversations, especially with a sibling.
Right.
But I believe that it was really helpful for my wife and I think anyone that gets married, like, premarital is really important.
No, I agree.
So so we'll see how that shakes out. But I'm glad we got some bonus material in, James.
Yeah, I gotta have it in there.
No, that's good. But no, I'm excited for this podcast for you, and it's really cool how this all kind of came about. And who knows? Maybe I'll be a recurring guest sometime down the road, because it sounds like we have a lot of common interests in all this.
Yeah, I had to. As I'm listening, there's even more commonalities. I'm like, I don't want to stop it every 5 seconds, but I'm like, hey, me too. But definitely. And then, again, this sets the premise of why I'm doing this too. Of like, I just bumped into you at the gym. You see me play with Nimbus. You knew my wife, but we just hit it off. But now it's like, This is like getting a cup of coffee and just getting to know each other. And I think guys can be they can isolate themselves. And the good thing is we'll knuckle up and just get it done. We'll go, we'll do it. We'll fight for our family and just do what's right. The problem is we'll just knuckle up and do it. And
Yeah.
when we need help, when we're hurting, we need someone to confide in and talk to. Another dude, we have similar perspective. We see the world very similarly. Just as guys, we're just built different.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as this. Hey, even if you don't drink coffee, but
You did offer, and I appreciate that.
But just you want to meet somewhere and chat, just talk about life, and then it de-isolates when you realize, hey, me too. I struggle with that too. I struggle balancing that too. I mean, I'm not just the one guy who's terrible,
Yeah, right.
but it inspires me like, oh, you're fighting the fight. I'm going to fight the fight. I'm going to keep at it. So it's like, this is something anybody can do. And I thoroughly encourage, especially as guys, like, be emotional, share the hard, share the difficulty. But when you exchange how you fight through it and overcome, it's just better for everybody.
Well, I think you're hitting on, there's clearly a need for some of these conversations. Like, I read this study, it was on cell phone usage, and it was analyzing men versus women, right? And men in their 20s, when they're dating and they're doing all the social stuff, they have all kinds of connections, right? But then once they get married and have kids, it drops way down. Where women continue, they're much more social than men and talking with their friends or their sisters or whatever, and they're getting stuff out where men don't really do that. So I think this is a pretty big gap. And I'll say that, since we've brought this up a couple of times, but I think that environments, so like New Hampshire and like New England in general is like some of the least religious states in the country, right? There's not as many people that go to church here. And I find that the men in church with like men's groups and such are one of the few places where they have openness and they're having real conversations with each other. And you have conversations like this where you're sharing your hardships and like you're open with each other without judgment. And like they're generally just trying to help each other be better, where there's a lot of, America, like everyone wants to, it's keeping up with the Joneses and looking like you have it all together. And people are, they're not sharing their hardships. They're sharing their highlight reel on Instagram and, not really revealing what's going wrong. So I do think having something like this and having people in your life that you can talk through this stuff, like take some humility and, being vulnerable, but
it's freeing though.
Yeah, it's freeing.
You know how freeing that is?
Yeah, and you'll feel better and you'll probably make more progress and not bottling up like all this stuff you're dealing with. It's just, such a better situation for yourself.
Well, there's that verse where it says, confess your sin one to another, and sin just means missing the mark. You just share, hey, I'm blowing it over here.
Right.
Like, well, me too. Like, really? It's not just me. I'm not the only, clown around that can't get stuff together.
Right.
Then there's an encouragement to come together and encourage each other, and that just goes so far.
Yeah,
I've experienced the benefits of it. I've been able to encourage others, be encouraged. But just building that kind of community around yourself, it's not hard.
Right.
But it takes, again, like we just doing this podcast, just, hey, can we grab a beer? I'm not a drinker, but can we grab a coffee? Can we grab just go do something, but just sit down, have the conversation, and just simply, what's your story? If you don't know.
Right.
What's your childhood like?
I think, guys, it's easier when we're doing something. Like you said, going bowling, going hiking,
Throw darts, hiking,
riding bikes, whatever. You just it kind of it takes away like some of the stigma of like going to sit down and talk almost for some guys. Like, let's go do something together, but it ends up being a social thing. So yeah, man, I think we got some more of this ahead of us. This is great.
I agree. Thank you for. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad we were able to make this happen. I'm sure that we'll figure out something down the road, but otherwise, I'm glad to be a part of the inaugural episode and looking forward to see where this goes, man.
Yeah, no, plenty of topics we want to dig into too. So, thank you for sticking this far if you have, and you have a wonderful day.